Welcome back, everyone. My name is Aline. I'm a new host for the Business of Higher Education series. Super excited to be here, especially with our fantastic expert, Mike Newcomb. Hi, Mike. How's it going?
Doing good, Aline. Nice to see you. Glad to be here again.
That's awesome. And thank you for joining us for these many sessions and for the ones upcoming in the future. Just a reminder, this is a live session. So if you do have questions, drop them in the chat. We will get to them in time. Well, Mike is the expert, so Mike will probably be the one answering them. Mike, today we're covering cost reduction. So that can go from IT, so the network team, all the way to the actual campus of the university, right? The physical environment. So how about we start with racking and stacking? What can you tell us about how companies like Juniper Networks can help reduce costs from that phase of implementation?
Sure. Well, a lot of the technology that we've got now, Aline, has to do with implementing things in a way that's in the cloud. And that cloud technology really helps you in a lot of different ways. And probably the one that is at the forefront right now is what we do with our Wi-Fi solutions. It's a paradigm shift in networking. Nobody has done anything like this. There are our competitors kind of allude that they can do AI, and then you dig down and you find out it's not really that. Well, it really is a differentiator of the architecture that has been selected. Last generation's architecture, for example, in Wi-Fi, required you to buy controllers. Your Wi-Fi access points would have to have controllers in a data center. Controllers take up power, they take up space, heat, cooling, everything adds to what goes on there. In addition to the fact that you have those, you have these controllers that then have to have master controllers. So even another box that has to be managed and has cost associated with it. Every one of those is another single point of failure that could technically take down an entire network because everything is centralized in this one situation. And then when you look at the last piece of it is that anytime you want to do anything new, and this is what has really driven a lot of people away from these third generation architectures toward the cloud-based architectures we talk about, because it's more than just the management piece. It's about what it takes to manage them and where they are. And so, for example, in our architecture, if we want to do location services, blue dot tracking of any individual device across the campus, we can do that pretty easily because it's built into the hardware. We have a single device that has the Wi-Fi antenna, it has the Bluetooth array, which gives us location capabilities to 1 to 3 meters, and then it's got telemetry for network management. What everybody else has to do is that data center has to be suddenly populated with more things if they want to do something new, and they found this out. So for example, imagine trying to administer in a university that says, I want to do something different. I want to have the ability to have Bluetooth beacons on my campus. We've had people go out and they'll have to go buy Bluetooth beacons. Okay, that's one thing. It kind of makes sense until they realize that the operational costs that go along with that is changing a battery, in some cases 8,000 beacons across the campus. And I had one of the higher education CEOs, or CTOs, I should say, tell me that. It says they realize now that it was a mistake because
it sounds like a lot of work.
Oh, it tremendously is. And then when you consider that's not where it ends, you've got to have, if somebody wants to do management, right? Again, the answer is, guess what? We have a solution, buy more equipment, which requires more like CAPE sensors that you put out along. Again, everything is kind of like tacked on to the original. And then inside the campus data center, you've got additional cloud management that you have to deal with. You've got to deal with extra hardware and servers and things like this. All of this is a tremendous amount of cost. It's a tremendous amount of maintenance and also injects failure into the network. And then the last piece of that is that because it's so complicated and all the interactions are so difficult to deal with, that, you can't even upgrade some pieces like the controller hardware because it's going to break 16 other things in the thing, right? So that's why you'll see controller-based architectures are that way. So that's about the platform. So Aline, to get to your, kind of finalizing that part of the question, it is about the architecture and understanding the difference between a cloud architecture, which is very easy to manage, to deal with. It's in one place. It's not a single point of failure. If something goes out in a mist network, for example, you don't take down the whole campus, as opposed to a controller, which will take down everything in that zone of destruction, I call it.
Absolutely. And actually on our Juniper.net page under customer success, one of the cases that our customer refers to saying that they saved up to 40% on infrastructure just switching to Juniper. So that's huge impact and super exciting. Now, Mike, you touched a little bit on AI. So when you talk about AI and machine learning, how these solutions would help reduce costs from a university standpoint?
Sure. So the raw brute force cost savings comes from the fact that you don't have to spend the time and the money to go and do a full diagnosis of a problem. So, every university I know that deals with how do I go about diagnosing problem in my network, whether it's in the wired network or whether it's in the Wi-Fi network. Usually it starts with somebody saying, "Hey, your Wi-Fi stinks." And immediately the thing is, oh, I don't know. And there's the thing we call the mean time to innocence. How fast can you prove that it's not your Wi-Fi or it's not the switches? Where is the real problem? And you think about the level of the person that has to go do this on the front end, forgetting about the costs associated in the back end where the unsatisfactory performance of the network gives you a bad name and all that. Pushing that aside, in general, what ends up happening is when somebody says, I have a bad Wi-Fi experience, let's just say somebody did that. The first thing that happens on a trouble ticket is to sit there and say, okay, well, I got to go find out, send somebody out to the site and go see if the light is green, right? There's not a lot of telemetry information that comes back from other people's stuff. Or they'll take a poll. Okay, now they'll run around a poll with a signal strength meter, say, well, what are they, where is my strength high or low? Was it this place was bad? Worse than that is to have the poor individual that was having the problem have to come back. And this could take days and weeks in some cases. And we've had this happen in the other architectures where people would say, okay, well, I don't know what the problem is. Come back here. Let's try to replicate it. And they do all this stuff. So imagine the amount of time and cost that's associated with just doing those things. And I'll give you a straight example. For example, let's just say that there's a problem with a switch somewhere in your network that doesn't have a VLAN that should be there. Mm-hmm. And this poor person is on campus and he's on his Wi-Fi. And as he goes to that place, suddenly his Wi-Fi experience is horrible because that VLAN doesn't exist there. He's not able to get onto his applications. And he looks at it and says, it's the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi stinks. I don't know why. It's just not, all I get is a circle doing it. And to go and solve that issue, and University of Texas Arlington has been on many calls with me where they experienced this is what happened in the old days and never happens now. Because what we do is when somebody comes in at the operations center, they just got to type in, how's my network today? What's the health of my network? And it says, oh, here's the problem. This person was having issues. And the reason is because there's a VLAN not on that switch in that room, right? And we've got lots of examples of where that takes a long time to figure out is diagnosed in seconds. And so to reduce the number of trouble tickets is very important, right? You talk about just colleges like one on Melbourne, where they used to have 10 wireless issues a day, 10. Oh, wow. And that's a lot when you consider it. And that where they couldn't connect to the network or whatever. And since they've installed what we have with us, they have 0. In addition, we have other universities that have, instead of staffing the frontline help desk with expensive people, that are people that can dive into other things, they use student workers, and the student workers can take the front end calls because of the ability of the artificial intelligence engine to say, here's the problem. Here's what it is. They just ask, how's my network look today? And they give them a little script. If this is what it is, then guess what? Here's what you do. And it's a
That
quick.
looks very easy. Plus, right, if the students around campus trying to use their phone or trying to access a class and the Wi-Fi is not working, they're not going to blame the network provider, right? It's always the school fault.
That's right.
So that's huge. And how easy it is to solve the tickets, that's absolutely incredible.
You know, there's one other thing I will mention, Aline, is that people, again, and the things that we do that are unique and how far ahead Juniper is in this industry is incredible. And we're talking like a 5-year lead. So people that are coming up and saying, I have AI, like I said earlier in the conversation, isn't necessarily saying just because you've got it means it's going to fix it. We've got experience in the cloud. So imagine being in the cloud with all the top retailers. I'm going to say ServiceNow, which we can talk about. You know, they had 100 tickets a month and now they're down to 2 and 0. But all their experiences of what they did and what it took to find out it was a bad cable on a switch, or that it was a missing VLAN, or that the DHCP server wasn't responding correctly. All that stuff was already found out by the machine learning engine has been ingested. So when you're in a cloud with somebody, you got to remember who's in it with you. And you're not having to go find that error because it's probably already been found by somebody else. So it makes the efficiency of what we do with machine learning and that piece that feeds artificial intelligence incredible.
I wish I had a solution like that for my problems. Just flag me ahead of time so I can solve it. Stress levels would go down like significantly in general. Now, Mike, sorry, we have to touch on this point, but when COVID hit, most schools decided to go virtual, right, to continue having their classes and everything else. Now we're talking about moving back to the schools. So how can a network provider such as Juniper help reduce costs from a campus infrastructure side?
Sure. So in a campus infrastructure, as people are coming back, again, the idea is that you should be able to do more with less. That's the mantra of higher education. It is, you know, nobody is expanding their IT staffs, but yet when people come back to campus, they need to have a better experience. And it's more than an experience where we say, I'm coming back to campus and I get on the network and do Netflix, you know, or in the dorm or whatever, right? So it's more than that. It has to be a platform that is a change agent. It should be able to allow the student, for example, and to allow the campus or the university to be able to identify campus students that maybe are at risk. As you know, when students come back, and I'm not talking at risk because of COVID, we certainly have tons of solutions that we have implemented in the field that will show you how to do those things. But there's even the thing of what is the wellness of a student? You know, are they engaged on the campus? You know, are they going to their classes? Because of the fact that once you're integrated into a platform like this, you now have the ability to go and say, here's what these students are doing. We have partners that have actually developed software that is all about student retention and focusing on the wellness of that student, right? So coming back, that requires it. And again, the idea here, and to the first part of your question, is how does it reduce costs? You know, obviously there's the students happier, more students stay on, they go through the cycle is better than people that drop out, right? So you want to keep them in the system. But the idea here is that the infrastructure itself, you shouldn't have to go buy a bunch of more equipment, more stuff to make something work, as opposed to having something that can provide a plethora of applications that are already there just because it has an SDK, whether you decide to do it yourself. And we have universities that use their grad students to go and develop applications for them. For example, University of Texas Arlington used a partner and they developed this beautiful blue dot system so that when the students came back on campus, they were able to know how to get to their class, how to find their instructor, just like it's like a Google Maps on the campus. And it was all fed by the platform.
I don't know if the instructors are so happy about that one, but students probably are.
Yeah, but you know, as an adjunct professor, the things I do like is to understand now that as the student comes into my classroom, you can have a roll call application that automatically registers that they've come to class and how long they dwelled in my class. Because I've had people, they'll come in, they try to check in and then slip out the back door, right? Well, you know, if you're a professor, usually you usually give some kind of credit for points, I will call it, for how long they stay in the classroom. So you know that. You also say if I assigned you to go to the library, you know if that happened or something like that. So there are those other applications in the location world that allow you to do more things without having to add more equipment and more complexity.
Mike, this is absolutely incredible, especially because on one question, right, you just show that how much an hour can affect student success, student retention, student happiness within the campus, right? Like it is the 21st century. I think if you have a student without Wi-Fi around the campus, it's not going to be a happy student for sure. So this is absolutely incredible. Because we only have 20 minutes and now actually 2 minutes to go, any final closing thoughts that you would like to touch base on?
Yeah, so one of the things I will tell you that all universities have to be prepared for is that what we just went through with COVID isn't the last time we're going to go through this. You're going to have to think about pivoting to that, and some institutions are definitely doing that when it comes to understanding they're going to have hybrid learning, right, going forward. And one of the other things about a platform that is extensible all the way to a home, in fact, is to be able to say as a professor, and we've had this situation come up, is what is the quality of the class that I'm delivering to my students from my home? I mean, putting aside that some instructors don't know how to use it, they're only good about being in front of somebody, they have to develop their curriculum, but at least be able to say, I've given them the best experience that I can have when it comes to teaching, right? And we've had situations where where certain systems have collapsed under the load. And what usually happens is the poor IT staff that's on campus or trying to manage this stuff have to be able to manage this remote things. And they usually don't like to manage what's on somebody's home. But we have come to find out that the easiest way to do this is by extending it, using our missed access point, for example, at their home, and being able to actually extend the SSID of the campus to their home. So now the same service and quality. And we had that situation happen where one professor was having a difficult time teaching. It was like not a good experience. Students weren't happy. And so, but because he had a missed access point there, we were able to diagnose the fact that, oh, guess what? Did you know that while you were teaching, that while you were doing that, people were running Netflix, Amazon Prime, and 2 streaming apps. And so your DHCP server was basically overloaded, your bandwidth overloaded. So you need to be able to control that, right? So it was able to easily help him become better at what he does, right? And the only other thing I will go along with that is that because of the fact that all of our access points capture data, like I said, we talked, I think in previous ones, I talked about 150 data points of every person, or every device, I should say, pre and post, every minute, all in the cloud for back to 30 days. When you think about what it used to take to diagnose trouble, when you did want to find what happened in a certain time frame, you have that information at your fingertips. So between the teaching at home hybrid and the ability to capture data is what puts us far ahead of everybody in the industry.
Mike, I will first say thank you for this was an incredible presentation. But I will also use your segment by saying about the hybrid education. Our next session, July 7th, we'll talk about diversity and equality from a technology perspective. So that will definitely touch upon learning from home, right? So having that extended campus to your home. So please join us with Jamie and Kia July 7th. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a great day.
Take care, everybody. Have a good one.